There is growing concern that Russia may be using cryptocurrency to avoid the impact of financial sanctions imposed by Western allies in response to the invasion of Ukraine. The sanctions have sent Russia's ruble to historic lows and have closed the country's stock market. As the war continues in Ukraine, there are many questions that arise in terms of the long-term impacts this may have on the global markets and economy. And to help us with these questions, we're joined by Brendan Caldwell, Director of Caldwell Securities Ltd. Brendan, welcome back to Forum Daily.
Thank you for having me, Nima.
Now, it's really interesting how this war has highlighted just how interconnected the global economy is. We're seeing commodities from oil to wheat being impacted. So let's get into this, Brendan. I want to start within Russia. So we've been seeing Russians line up at ATMs to get their money out of the banks. What about cryptocurrencies? Do they have access to crypto right now?
Well, I believe that they do. I mean, I haven't tried to access cryptocurrency in Russia myself, but I understand they have limited access to crypto. But crypto is not a market that is so well developed that you can, or is it so fungible that today you can either buy bread or a mega yacht with your crypto? It is a means of value that's still in its transfer of wealth that's still in its infancy. So access to crypto is maybe a little bit helpful, but if you're accessing it using rubles that have fallen, as you said, to a fraction of their current value, I don't know how really helpful it's going to be in dealing globally, as Russia's going to need to at some point.
And I think that's why the U.S. is working on regulating cryptocurrencies, especially amid concerns that Russia is using crypto to avoid the impacts of Western sanctions. So taking all of this into consideration, Brendan, how do you see cryptocurrencies evolving from all of this?
Well, the first words that came into my mind when you talked about the U.S. government trying to regulate everything was, good luck with that, as the kids would say. So my father's often said, incidents are used to do things you want to do anyway. Governments inherently don't like crypto because it is a repudiation of the truly atrocious job that most governments have done, even in the West, of maintaining their own currency as a store of value. By printing money for really the last 15 years in an uncontrolled manner, we've somehow managed to have little to no inflation, and yet, at least in terms of goods and services, but now we're seeing a massive increase in inflation, which, as much as we're told it's temporary, we haven't seen this sort of inflation ramp up since the 60s. I mean, really, not in my entire lifetime have we seen inflation come back like that. So governments don't like crypto because there is a fixed amount of it. It's created at a fixed controlled rate. It allows for a transaction of value outside of the government realm. So I can understand why they want to regulate it, but they're like a big giant lumbering behind something that's moving a lot faster than they are.
And we know inflation is also connected to commodities like oil and natural gas and wheat. So considering that Russia is the third largest oil producer in the world, Ukraine is called the breadbasket of Europe in terms of wheat. How do you see these commodities kind of evolving from this war as well?
Well, obviously, the price of everything has gone up, but the price of commodities, as you say, especially. Now, if you have like a Western middle upper class level of job, you don't think that much about the price of bread, which is why the big grocery store chains in Canada managed to come to some arrangement around the price of bread that saw it at higher levels than it really ought to have been, and nobody noticed for a long period of time. But in most of the rest of the world, the price of bread is the question of life and death. So when you see these prices going up, it's not an intellectual nicety, an economic experiment. Can be a life and death situation. So if we see these commodity prices globally much, much higher, you will see, I think, a greater degree of civil unrest. We've even seen it in Canada such that it made the news. Now, it wasn't about inflation, but it was a repudiation of governments trying to control things. You're going to see that, I think, in a lot of the rest of the world. People noticed when Canada started to have civil unrest. I think you'll see it elsewhere, should we see these commodity prices continue to be so high.
All right, Brendan, just about a quick 30 seconds left here. But what about Russian oil? How do you see that this situation in terms of the oil industry in the long term due to this war?
Well, it'd be really great if Canada had an oil pipeline to blue water that works. I mean, Keystone's looking very smart right now. I mean, I have totally boggled why we send so much money to countries that really hate us in the Western world when Canada has as clean an oil as going to be produced. You can call it the tar sands if you will, but the environmental regulations in Canada are much better than they are in most of the other countries we import oil from. So Canadian oil, eh? That's all I got to say.
Some food for thought there, Brendan. Thank you again for your time today.
Thank you, Nima.